So last year I made a video about how Whiplash, my all-time favorite film, changed my life and why I think it's such a masterpiece. I really enjoyed doing that video and people seem to like it, so I thought why not keep going. So I think from now on, once a year, I'll make a video where I go really in-depth about a film that I love and a film that has affected me personally outside of filmmaking, and a film that, had it been struck from existence, I would be a very different person as a result. So today, I want to talk about Christopher Nolan's Inception and why it changed my life. Let's break it down. Now, Christopher Nolan is, without question, one of the most celebrated and influential filmmakers of this century. Not only are his stories highly praised and celebrated, his work has inspired many to become filmmakers themselves. The style of directing that we see in Inception does genuinely feel like an amalgamation of everything he had done before. Because what Inception really is a high-concept art house film shown through the lenses of a big-budget sci-fi action epic. That is a combination that few directors on the planet are trusted to pull off, and even fewer possess the ambition to do so. When we look at the way Inception is made, there are elements of Nolan's early work from Following, Memento, and Insomnia, character-driven pieces that really delve into the psyche of the protagonist, allowing us into their minds, and in this case, literally bringing us into his mind. But what you also have is the stuff that he learnt with the first two Dark Knight films, and even The Prestige to a certain degree, which is this ability to balance so many characters in such an intricate plot, giving them all arcs, giving them all purpose, whilst constantly maintaining a forward trajectory for the story. The sheer level of focus required to do this as a writer and a director, I think, is really impressive. On a visual level, when we look at all of Nolan's films, they are often a little substance over style, let's say. That's just my opinion. His films, especially the ones shot by Wally Pfister, have a rather grounded and realistic look and feel, a more muted color palette, which of course may be attributed to Nolan's colorblindness, but I guess the best example of this idea is the way Nolan films Batman versus the way Zack Snyder films Batman. This is a stunning shot, but it's also very much grounded in a more tangible reality, whereas this is much more heightened and comic accurate. The reason I say this is because I think Inception is where Nolan and Pfister were really able to be a little more bold and a little more surreal with their visuals. Take the opening set piece, for example. Nolan has always expressed his love for Bond films, and this whole segment definitely feels like his attempt at that. There's a sense of style from the costumes to the set to the lighting that feels a little bit more stylish. I mean, look at this shot in comparison to this, right? There are certain similarities and they're definitely comparable. The smooth camera moves, the minimal use of handheld, which Nolan does enjoy every now and then. It really all comes together to create what I think is a more aesthetically dynamic experience. We get these extreme close-ups contrasted with these extreme wide shots, which, have been a little bit more limited in his previous films, and so Inception really is a step up in that sense. The production design is also terrific, with sets that not only look and feel more interesting than some of the stuff we've had in the past, but sets and locations that really play a role in the story. The choices of location make it really easy to separate the different layers of the dream, and in a way almost represent different genres of films. The action-driven heist film, the suspenseful character-driven thriller, and then an all-out sort of David Lean-esque grand epic. This is truly one of those films that will age so well because of the minimal use of CGI. Everything that could be done for real was done for real, from the rotating corridor, the collapsing mansion, the snow fortress, because all these larger-than-life things were all captured on camera with real effects. It makes Inception that much more timeless from a filmmaking point of view. Lee Smith's editing as well plays such an important role in this film. All of Nolan's films, I think, are more reliant than most when it comes to the piecing together of different scenes and timelines. And the final 20 minutes of Inception is an editor firing on all cylinders, truly working at the top of his game. Now, I don't know much about film music and composing, but what I can say is that you cannot talk about Inception without talking about Hans Zimmer's score. It is, in my opinion, the perfect balance of cool and stylish with genuine, raw human emotion. And many of the pieces in the film are a great representation of why I love the medium of cinema. They enhance the images on screen, and the combination of the two create what I think is movie magic. Aside from The Lord of the Rings, I think Inception's score is probably my all-time favorite, with Time being my single favorite piece of music from any film, I think. I also want to touch on the tone, because throughout Nolan's career, he's often been criticized for his films taking themselves way too seriously, and then feeling pretentious and cold as a result. Although I personally disagree with this, I can understand where those people are coming from. And once again, Inception is very much a step up in that department. With the inclusion of characters like Eames, the film becomes significantly more playful, and the moments of levity do a great job of complementing the more serious stuff, without taking away from its weight, of course, creating a more well-rounded and accessible film as a result, which is great, especially when the story is so ridiculously complex. In terms of story and characters, I think Inception is almost the polar opposite to Whiplash, and that is perhaps why I love them both so much. Where one is a focused, character-driven narrative that is tight and dense with two primary characters, the other is this sprawling, quest-driven adventure with a vibrant ensemble, whilst also maintaining that sense of intimacy and heart. The story and the world established in the film is very complex. I've heard a lot of people say that Inception is a film that requires multiple viewings to fully understand. I think that Inception is a film that requires multiple viewings to fully appreciate. The detail on every frame and every cut and every line is something to behold. Unlike so many other masterpieces that slowly ease you into the world, Inception definitely differentiates from them as it drops you right in and almost pushes you to follow everything. It does not expect the audience to be lazy viewers, but it respects their intelligence. From an intellectual point of view, there is this confidence in the screenplay not found in too many films, and Nolan evens this out with the emotional side, the emotional weight provided by his actors, as to not make the film feel too pretentious or superior, shall we say. The reason I think Dom Cobb is such a great protagonist is that, like, say, Andrew Neiman, this is a person who has a very clear want, and establishes very early on that he will do almost anything and everything humanly possible to get what he wants. That alone garners the respect of the audience, I think, in the same way that someone with that mentality in the real world would have the admiration of most people. It's not so much the desperation, but the ambition and the willingness to go to the ends of the earth for what you love that makes that character, that makes Dom Cobb one of Nolan's stronger characters. Another thing that I think makes the character so compelling is that he is running to and from something. He needs to get back to his children, of course, but he also needs to come to terms with the death of his wife, which is an internal conflict that becomes brilliantly visualized in the dream. But also during the real world part, he's also on the run from Cobalt Engineering. So Cobb wants to move forward just as much as he is being forced to do so. So there's this really interesting dynamic of a character both wanting and needing something that we rarely get in films of this type. The supporting cast are also brilliant, and they all get their moment to shine. The characters have enough moments to stand on their own, but also serve the protagonist, and more importantly, they serve the story to brilliant effect. The biggest compliment I could give to the way the supporting characters are portrayed and handled is that I would absolutely love to see a standalone story or multiple standalone stories focusing on each of them individually. Also, there's actually this really cool detail, which I'm sure many of you already know, that the first letters of each character's names actually spell out Dreams Pay. We also need to talk about the ending of the film, because it is one of my all-time favorites. The storytelling is so simple and yet so masterfully done at the same time. It's the camera in relation to the performance, in relation to the music. I love that they hit you with that final bit of ambiguity, that just when you think everything is perfect and everything is fine, that it instills this sense of uncertainty within the audience, this one last trick. And that is genius. The fact that on an emotional level, you have in many ways concluded the film with these characters, but it leaves you thinking with that final little piece. So it's satisfying, but also challenging. Now, I'm sure some of you out there are probably wondering whether I think Cobb is still dreaming at the end. I personally don't. I think that he is awake, based on the wedding ring, based on the fact that Michael Caine has come out and said that all the scenes that Michael Caine is in is meant to be in the real world because Nolan told him so. But to be honest with you, I don't really think that that matters, because what matters is whether or not Cobb has completed his goal, and his goal is to get back to his children, and he has. So in my opinion, it's not that important whether he's awake with his children or whether it's all in his head, because for him, for that individual character, he's gotten everything he needs. And so in many ways, his story, or at least that specific arc of his story, is finished in the most satisfying and beautiful way possible. Now, I think it's fair to say that Nolan as a director has certainly influenced me as a filmmaker. The way he takes full advantage of cinema being a timed art form, using that as a storytelling tool in all his films. The non-linear structure, which was of course very popular before he came around, but was sort of taken in a new and interesting direction in his scripts. The intercutting of multiple sequences and storylines that rise and fall in momentum together. These are all things that have really played a role in defining my taste in films, and also the way that I like telling stories and the way that I like to make my films. There's also, of course, the idea that all heist films, but specifically Inception, serve as metaphors for the art of filmmaking itself, with a director, producer, production designer, actor, studio, and audience. Nolan has said that there is a lot of him in the character of Dom Cobb. In a more figurative sense, he's the team leader who gets deeply invested in the job and has to go and gather all the other team members and convince them to join him. And also, he can never lose sight of the end goal. And then there's the more literal stuff, like him being a blonde guy who likes wearing suits, and the fact that his actual son is playing Cobb's son, James. But the reason this metaphor is so impactful to me personally is that Nolan is in many ways wearing his love for cinema on his sleeve. Just like Damien Chazelle with Whiplash, you can tell that the director of this film is someone who loves cinema more than almost anything, and feels no need to hold back on expressing his passion. That's something we'll be exploring even more in depth in next year's film, just a bit of foreshadowing there. But yeah, I love Inception because of the creativity, because of the epic and unconventional nature of the film. It really showed a young me on the cusp of fanaticism, shall we say, that this was possible. It was one of the first films I saw that really highlighted the magic of the art form. It's a film that is just as intelligent as it is emotional, one that challenges your head and your heart, a film that shows a person doing everything in his power to achieve his goals, which is so relatable. But most of all, something that has hit me hard in the recent years is the fact that such a big name director, at one of the many heights of his career, is able to express his unquestionable love for this art form in such a bold and proud and genuine way. That's really one of the reasons why I think Inception is a masterpiece, and that is why Inception is my joint favorite film of all time.